inclusive, Will, you know? Jeez, as if I care. Hey everybody, welcome to the State of the Industry 2024, almost 2025. I think this is such a pivotal time for our industry. You know, we've got AI changing how we work. We've got YouTube changing the way we educate photographers. And we've got communities like Facebook groups replacing groups like this, where we get together and talk about things that are important to all of us. So it just seems like such an incredible time in our industry and a good time to get together and talk about this stuff and learn from these amazing panelists from varied industries. So I think we're going to have just a breadth of conversation, you know, how everyone's seeing the industry maybe differently, maybe not. You know, online, if you read a lot of photographers' forums, it seems like the industry is really going through a lot of changes right now for a lot of photographers, and they're really trying to figure it out. So kudos for all of you being here and trying to understand where things are going. Darrin, who is our moderator, is on the national board of the ASMP, who is also the sponsor for our event. More appropriately, the ASMP Ohio Valley chapter, which incorporates Columbus, Louisville, Indianapolis, Lexington, Cincinnati. So it's a very wide chapter, but we are the sponsors for this event. And they say that all politics are local, and I kind of feel the same way about our organization. I think it's all about the local organization that really propels us. The national organization does a lot of things that we can't do. They fight for us on a national level with lawmakers. You know, they offer legal clinics where you can get free advice once a month for 30 minutes. They have all kinds of forums online if you need model releases, if you need business forums. They have online education. They have Find a Photographer to help our clients find us. They have Find an Assistant to help us find, you know, our crew. So there's a lot of great things that the national organization does, but our local organization does so much more. You know, we have programming that's very specific to our members. We have tech talks every other month that have been really informative and really well done. Those are online, so you don't even have to come to an event like this. We're producing events like this, and we also do Pints and Pixels, which if you haven't been to a Pints and Pixels, we get together, we have some beers, we have some pizza. ASMP provides the pizzas. We just, you know, kind of hang out and share images if you want to. Maybe you bring something you've been working on, personal projects, something you've done for a client. It's not necessarily a critique session unless that's what you want. It's really just about sharing our work. And I'm always inspired, you know, usually by the person I was least expecting to be inspired by. But it's always this amazing stuff that's shown at Pints and Pixels. So I just encourage you to kind of come out and join us. It's every other month on the second Thursday. So the next one will be December 12th. That'll kind of be our holiday blowout. So maybe a little extra alcohol, a little extra door prizes or something. So anyway, a quick story about Pints and Pixels, because I think Jim Talkington, who is my co-chair for ASMP membership for the Ohio Valley chapter, Jim came to a Pints and Pixels right after COVID. We kind of got him back into gear right before COVID and then tried to do them online. That didn't really work. But after COVID, we got together in person again, and Jim brought some images he had shot through COVID on his iPhone, or not even iPhone, on his phone, his Android. And he took pictures in a cemetery. And these pictures were amazing. But Jim is known as a videographer. His clients he does videography for. So they really weren't interested in his pictures in the cemetery of the flowers. But we were. You know, we saw these amazing images. And I just felt like, where else was Jim going to show these? If he was going to show them to his friends and family, yeah, those are nice. You know, nobody would understand it the way we did as fellow creators and photographers and videographers and content creators. We understood what those meant. And that encouraged Jim to actually enter the ASMP Best Of competition. And he won for those photographs. Something he, you know, said he didn't really consider himself a photographer anymore. He thought of himself as a videographer. Even though photography was where he started, it kind of took him back to his roots. So it was just a full circle thing of what I think is so important about Pints and Pixels and about our community. So with that, I will introduce Jim Talkington and let him get us started. Thank you.
I'll just talk briefly about how this event came to be. It's been just such a joy working with everyone on this event, our committee. I learned early on in my career that if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to get in a different room. And being a part of ASMP really has elevated what I've done working with these people. It's been a constant learning, joyful process. And we're excited about the panelists that we've put together. I think 20 years ago, a panel like this would have been very narrowly targeted at the advertising industry. And what we found at our Pints and Pixels events is that the scope of ASMP is widening. All photographers, all creators are looking for a home, and we've kind of become that with our Pints and Pixels regionally. So as Terry said, I encourage you to come to those events. And I still use the word photographer, but I do focus on video now, I focus on filmmaking, and I also include content creators in that. So when you're hearing us refer to photographers, we're referring to all of these people in this world of online content. I do want to recognize a few people right now, but we're going to save the big recognition contributors toward the end of the event. I want to talk a little bit about our three title sponsors. We have K&R Photographics. Rob is here. Rob has supported ASMP for years and years. He may be the longest standing member of ASMP in the room, I'm not quite sure. We also have Studio 821. No?
Alan.
Alan, thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for coming out. It's a joy to see not only faces that I recognize, but also a lot of young faces that I don't recognize yet, and to see these names coming in has been so cool. Do we have people from outside the greater Cincinnati area?
Yeah.
Great, perfect. In addition to K&R Photographics, we have Studio 821, which is a rental studio across the river in Kentucky. It's an amazing place, many rooms. If you're looking for a beautifully styled place to shoot, they have a variety of different rooms to choose from, in addition to a cyc wall, the typical kind of photo studio things. Then we also have Craddock Software, which has provided 2 seats of software, a photo quote type software and a photo business software. So our drawings at the end, we'll have a couple of $25 gift certificates and a couple sensor cleanings from K&R Photographics. We will have a 5-hour free rental from Studio 821, and then we've got the Craddock Software. And you all have swag bags, which is amazing stuff. We'll give credit to those folks at the end, and we'll give credit to the committee that put the event together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darrin, our moderator.
I'm rather surplus to my own life. They took my thunder. I have nothing to say. I'm sitting down. Again, welcome. I'll introduce me again, Darrin Scott Hunter, National Board Member for ASMP. I'm an architectural photographer. That's my genre. I started as an architect here at DAP, locally educated architect. Worked for 10 years and went back to graduate school at DAP for graphics. Stayed on faculty in graphics for 6 years, and then started my own freelance architectural photography and graphics business. Joined ASMP. My first exposure to ASMP was through the old Yahoo groups, architectural specialty group chat boards. And I was still working as an architect, and it was about 2 years of me being a fly on the wall, listening to these seasoned pros talk about everything from contracts to difficult jobs to shipping equipment and insurance, and it was a full-blown business education that really gave me the confidence to go out on my own and start my own business. So it definitely works. There's community to be had if you reach out, and today is great evidence. I'm super excited for us to be in person. Isn't it great not to have Zoom on our backs? Right? That's wonderful. So that's my introduction. I'm going to have all the panelists introduce themselves right now. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you work and what you do. Let's start from the left. If you'll notice, by the way, every time the panel talks, we have this slide up with all their pictures and their names. So if you want to talk to anybody about name, we are so organized, they are seated left to right like they are in the pictures. How about that? So Tony.
All right. How's that? Good. I'm Tonya Arrasmith. I am a commercial photographer primarily. That's how I began. 1987, I sat in a room with Alan Brown, and him and Tim told me about ASMP, and that has been the biggest driving force in my career. Just because what they taught and showed me that initial meeting, I used that throughout my career. So anyway, I was a product photographer in the land of PNG here. I did product for 15 or 20 years and took that product world into a lot of the commercial conceptual pieces. I love to do humorous things. I love to build sets. And so I decided I want my portfolio to reflect that. And I did that for quite a few years. We were very successful at it. And about 15 years ago, we saw the changeover in just content creation, that you couldn't just do photography anymore, or I felt we couldn't. we had to be able to provide video, your own editing, all of these kind of things. And my partner Sarah and I in the photography industry, I teamed up with Joe Harrison and Todd Joyce to form a company called Optic Lizard. And so now we do full-scale production stuff. We do the photography, we do the video, and we tell our clients stories with heart. And that's kind of where I am today.
And Tonya, I think you do some client-based AI work. You do quite a bit of work.
Oh yes, I forgot about the AI. Yes, that's one of the beautiful things that I picked up in the last couple of years. Talking with Terry and Alan and being on a couple panels and a couple competitions and Todd and Joe. I'm able to, with my product work, I'm able to create backgrounds through AI. And I drop my products into these AI backgrounds. And it's seamless and it's billable and I'm making money off AI. I'm not a doom and gloom. I don't hate AI. I love AI. I see the problems, absolutely, but I mean, I use it every day from these backgrounds to expanding my backgrounds through Photoshop to eliminating, objects in my photos that I might create through AI, and there's a chair in there I didn't like, and I'll go into Photoshop then, and not the AI software, and eliminate it. Well, that's AI.
Well, you're going to be the go-to for the AI questions that come later. We left a bigger chunk of time for AI and technology shake, so that's going to be a big topic. So look for follow-up questions there. Tonya.
Hi everybody, I'm Tonya Bolton. I'm a portrait photographer, and I recently ChatGPT called me a pose perfectionist and beauty whisperer, and I really like that.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
That's cool.
That's how I like to use AI.
That's a business card right there.
Words, marketing a lot. So portrait photography I've been in since 2011. I was taught early on how to achieve higher sales in the portrait world, from $5,000 to $10,000 per sales session, per portrait session. So I'm really passionate about helping other photographers do that. I like to pay that forward and teach other people how to have a lucrative career doing their dream job.
Fantastic. That's great. Follow-up questions on that too, for sure. Kailah.
Hi everyone, I'm Kailah Ware. I'm not a beauty whisperer, but I am a filmmaker. That's very cool. See what I can be. So I went to college for filmmaking up at Wright State. I got my degree, and then I didn't know what I was going to do because it's like I could move, I could come back home. But from graduating, I came back to Cincinnati and I started working on different films because we had a lot of movies coming in at the time, around like 2015, like 2019. But I hated it. It was not for me. I didn't really like or enjoy set life. I don't know if any of you have worked on movies. It's grueling. It's 12 hours a day, standard day. We're talking about 15 hours if you're doing overtime. And I knew that that wasn't going to be my pathway forward. So I was always really interested in being able to use my voice to tell stories, especially from a democracy-based lens and from just freedom building. And that's something that I really work on and I'm very passionate about. So I have built my creative agency, Sunny Blue. We're based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we work with a lot of nonprofits and foundations to really tell these stories of real people doing real things and moving their mission forward. Very narrative-based work that I get to work in, and I love it. I also was taught how to be a photographer by this man over here, Will Jones, at Wright State. And so I've done a lot of photography, but really shifted into mainly focusing on filmmaking and doing client work.
Awesome. So great. David?
Does this work?
It is. We can hear you now.
That's big. Yeah. Hi everyone.
You can hold it.
Can I go ahead?
Sure.
You can. Okay. Sorry. My name's David Volker. I'm vice president at LBK. We're a creative consultancy here in Cincinnati. I've worked at LBK for 20 years. So I started there as a young designer with hair. And then the beauty expert that you see in front of you right now, is what the industry looks like after 20 years of rigor and hard work and and having some staying power and stamina. Over the past 6 months, we've kind of taken the stance of adapt or die, like many of us. So we've spent a lot of rigor and a lot of time and a lot of training, all of our design team, our whole expression team, to use AI and work it into our workflow. So I have a little bit of imposter syndrome sitting in this room. I'm not a photographer, so I'm a creative director. So thanks for inviting me in. Really excited to be here. So do a lot of work with Terry, wherever Terry went.
Nice.
Oh, there he is, in the back. So, Terry, thank you for the invite. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have your perspective. And Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Hanako Momohara, and I'm here as representing a educator. So I am a professor at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. I head the photography major, and I am currently the studio arts chair as well. I have many hats. Shout out to, I have a couple students here, Jordan and Simone. We have a very varied program where students are trying to get into fine arts, commercial arts, freelance work, just a lot of different things. My specialty is more the fine arts, although for some of the examples I did put in some work for hire that I've done as well. I have work at Wright State right now in a show called Rewritten, and then also at the Aronoff Weston Gallery, if you all want to pop over there. It's photo focus month, so there's a lot going on. Yeah.
I saw that show. I saw the gallery there at the street level.
Fantastic.
I have to go on my way home.
I'm on the lower level. Yeah, the top level is Rachel Banks.
Nice. The deer.
Yeah, oh, it's really beautiful. Yeah, there's a group show by Sora Kong, curated by Sora Kong on the lower level.
Awesome. That's great. So you can see how distinguished and varied the voices are. I'm going to show you a little bit about the format for today so you understand what's going on. The microphone. Hello. We organized this event around a report, a survey that Zenfolio and 5 other organizations put together. They do it every year. We started this as a prompt, basically, so we can have some statistics to ground us in these different topics. We reorganized the content a little bit from the report, but I'm going to show you some slides for each one of these topics that give you some stats from that survey. It's a very broad survey. And then at each section, we're going to stop at the end for about a minute or so to let you ask questions and have a little interaction going on. Because we're not Zooming today, we don't have like a moderator that's watching chat questions and can sort of, save them up. So we didn't want you to have to wait until the end and forget what you wanted to ask about a topic earlier. That's why we're stopping at each section there. So you're gonna have plenty of time to interact with the panel. And at the end, we're also gonna have an open 20-minute session for Q&A where sky's the limit. It can be whatever you wanna talk about. So I'll start with the survey itself and show you a little bit about what they came up with. It's a very broad survey. You can find it online right there at zenfolio.com. If you just search for it, you can see every year, and you can see past years to see how numbers have changed if you like. It's a big survey. It's almost 8,000 photographers all over the world that responded to this, so it's a pretty big sample. It's mostly North America. It was about 77% USA. A combination of 16 countries, the next big chunk, 11, and then the UK, Canada, and Australia. But if you see the map up here with all the blue dots, those are all the respondents. So it really is a pretty global group. It's just that some of these dots all over the world might have been a smaller slice of the pie. So you're going to get a lot of foreign input there too. It's a worldwide survey. I'm going to give you just the key high-level takeaways from what the pulse of the industry is globally. Inflation and the economy has definitely impacted photographers in the last year. Wedding photographers are still the top earners in 2023. The trend in tech from DSLR technology toward mirrorless has only increased, it's only accelerated. And AI usage, of course, has surged enormously over the last year because it's really only been the last 12 months or so when tools have become widely available where you didn't have to be sort of geeky to find stuff on your own and really work on it. And photographers are viewing the business outlook for the remainder of this year and into next year with more caution and optimism. We're all a little down on the economy, even if the data doesn't support it. I think emotionally we feel like it's a rough time right now, and that probably makes sense politically as well. So this is one stat I wanted to be our starting question for the panel that really kind of shocked me from the survey. This is the age breakdown of the respondents. Maybe that's because young people don't care about surveys. Maybe. Could be some of that. But 77% of the respondents were over 40. And 70% of them already had 10 years of industry experience. So I was thinking about, there's a quote that's often misattributed to Gandhi, that you can judge any society by how it treats a certain group of people, the young people, the old people, the sick, and the criminals, right? So I guess my opening question for the panel is, how are we treating our young? Right, forget AI. If this demographic continues, there's no industry in 15 years anyways. We've all aged out. So AI is not going to take us away. Retirement is, or death, right? So how are we treating our young? Are we creating viable, sustainable pathways into the industry? How do you feel about youth in photography? All of you, any of you, jump in.
Okay. I feel like, I do feel like that this survey may not have encapsulated everybody.
Sure.
To your point is, a lot of young people aren't necessarily taking surveys. And then I think that the way that a lot of young creators identify themselves is as creators and not necessarily just as photographers. So I think that young people in particular, are still very much so interested in the field and participating in the field. I just think that the way that they show up is different than in past ways, and I think it's definitely more of this digital content story space than like a traditional photographer.
Yeah.
I can jump in there too. You know, I'm dating myself a little bit, but when I started at the Art Academy in 2006, there was no video or digital arts program. All of that was encompassed through photography. And in fact, when I was hired, I have my MFA is actually in expanded media, so they really wanted me to build some of those new technologies and labs and things like that. But as we progress and that digital space becomes bigger and bigger, those parts have peeled off from photography. So now we have a film video minor that students can have. It's not encompassed with the photo department anymore. We have a digital arts and animation major, which is not encompassed by the photography department anymore. So I think that maybe it's a semantic also issue, that what we consider traditionally photography, what would have been considered photography, is now so many different things that it's hard to pinpoint what that is. And the young people are interested in it, they just don't think the same way about it because they don't have the history there.
Yeah. Tonya, you mentioned your mentoring work with photographers, especially on the business side. Maybe through that, have you come in contact with younger photographers and their attitudes coming into the field?
Yes, and I will say my experience is they're great and they're very passionate about photography and creating images and things like that, but they're not so excited about the business side. Like, they don't even want to talk. They don't understand the importance of really hunkering down on that part of the industry. They're just so excited to make these images and make their content, which is great. They have the passion for it. And I'm with Kailah. I don't think the survey is accurate on that side of it with the age, because I feel like, especially in the portrait world, every Christmas there's probably 1,000 or more new photographers entering the industry. So,
Right.
you know, they're getting their camera for Christmas. So that's kind of my
senior pictures.
Yeah.
High school kids.
Exactly. Got it. Okay, well, we're going to move on to the first big topic. It'll sort of dovetail in here, genres, talking about wedding photographers or holiday and people. We're going to talk about specialties within the industry. I'm going to show you a few stats from the report. Here are the overall, of all the respondents, here are the breakdowns of people that would call themselves these kinds of photographers. If you'll notice, I think the big takeaway here, there's a big chunk of 42 that say other, right, and everything else. But portrait, wedding, family, sports, event, the interesting thing is there's been a shift toward people. those are all essentially portraiture of different kinds, right? It's portrait photography. And there was some theorizing in the writers of the report and the summaries that I think it could be that that's just post-COVID. We're finally coming back together again, and there are big events where people are all together again, so maybe we're just doing more of that professionally. But it might be also true that in difficult political times, difficult economic times, maybe people have a rise in nostalgia. Maybe we want images of the things that comfort us in scary times, right? Family, pets, all that kind of photography. That could be driving some of it. Here's a slide about the shift from last year, 2023 to 2024. Architecture, my love, fell out of the top 5, was replaced with family. So again, this shift away from industrial, sort of corporate shooting and more toward people. Here's the part-time photographers. This last slide was full-time, and under part-time photographers, landscape fell a full 5%, right? So these, one note, there in the terms of the survey, we call client photography anything direct to a client who's commissioning that work, and the non-client categories are things like fine art, landscape, wildlife, where you might not have been commissioned to do that work, but you're going to eventually make work product that either goes into a fine art gallery or is sold, right, print sales. So that's what you're seeing there in those notes. So again, a shift toward people. Here's the income, and Tonya, here's your follow-up. Full-time people are above, part-time people are below. The interesting thing about this self-reported incomes among full-time, self-claimed full-time photographers is there's this huge economic gap. 20% of the respondents said they make less than $20,000 a year, and 20% said they make over $100,000 a year. Everyone else is spread in between. That's a big chunk at the end. I don't know how you call yourself a full-time photographer and you're making $20,000 or less a year, right? I have a feeling a fair bit of that is actually the global respondents who are working in markets globally and making a whole lot less base pay than American photographers are. That could be driving some of that. But it's interesting nonetheless. Among part-time photographers, the biggest chunk, 60% making less than $10,000 a year, and that's what you'd probably expect. So, specialties. First, I wanted to ask the panel, do you think the same way about photographic genres anymore? Are they even relevant? Are clients or galleries asking you for more genre bending or blended kinds of work than you have in the past? Yeah.
I can jump in just kind of from an agency perspective. We've kind of found that larger, more sophisticated clients buy expertise. So they're really looking for you to specialize. I think that's just because the amount of risk involved today and the amount of money and capital that they're putting into photo shoots, content creation. And so we've worked hard at LPK to create case studies that are really analogous to problems that our clients want to solve. It's like, look, we've done this before. We have proof that it's effective. So over my 20 years, we've called ourselves a lot of things at LPK. We've tried it all. But we found getting like focused and really knowing what you do well is more effective because clients then can trust you, know you've done it before.
Right. And did those case studies wind up sort of blooming into the start of creative briefs a lot of times for your creative help?
Yeah, and sometimes it takes the sexiness out of this job because they're like, just do the Gillette thing.
Yeah,
the thing that you did for them, you know. But you know, you can find ways to be creative.
Sure. Anyone else on that topic? Genres and silos, so to speak, of the discipline?
I don't want to talk too much. I talked last time.
It's fine.
I'm a teacher, so I'm used to talking a lot. I think this is an age issue also, that things are becoming much more plural, and folks don't want to be pigeonholed into one thing or another. A lot of what we focus on as far as curriculum goes is having students be able to learn how to then learn later, because the software is going to change in a year.
Right.
And students are going to have to know how to figure out how to do the thing that they were doing before because it's located somewhere else. Or there's going to be a new tool and they're going to have to experiment with that. You know, once they graduate, the best thing that I can do is actually help them navigate new things. So category, like, we don't really categorize whether or not that's the kind of work you're making, the software that you're using, etc. It's just like we're all makers and trying to use those tools for whatever it is that we're doing.
Absolutely.
And then I was gonna say, just to kind of add to that, I think it's a generational thing. So when I know like older photographers, older creators, they're like, hey, I do this thing and I know how to do it like the back of my hand. I do this one thing.
Yeah.
And I think that as the generations behind have come along, we're a lot more hyphenated. So it's like, I do this, and I do that, and I do this. And it drives a lot of the older folks I know crazy. They're like, yo, you actually cannot possibly know how to do all of these things. You can't be a DP and a director and a photographer. But I just feel like now that is completely what's happening because the budgets are going. So if you want to go and you want to make more money, then you have to learn how to be trim, right? So which means it's like, hey, I'm not getting paid to be hyper focused. I'm getting paid to be able to get the job done. And the least amount of people that I can incorporate on the job because I have at least a very base knowledge of how to do 1 to 2 things, then I think that's what you're starting to see, that hyphen. So that way people can survive and they can make their money.
Yeah. I would ask the follow-up here to the panel, including fine art, Emily here, have any of you experienced your own sort of shift in what you would consider your specialties or genres in the last few years?
Absolutely. You know, as I stated earlier, I mean, I grew up just doing photography, you know, and built my business. But as we've gotten into the video world and production world, I mean, we've had to streamline that, you know, and like you said, when the people we go up against a lot of times on our video, you know, there's some big crews, you know, and they have 20 people in there, and they're charging big bucks, and you know, we're coming in with 6 and 8 people, or that's a big crew for us. So we've learned to streamline that and find our niche that we can be profitable in that, you know, when
Yeah. So it was mostly business goals that drove that shift. Tonya?
And I was just gonna say, in the portrait world, I know years ago, I mean, I basically built my business being known for senior portraits. That's my main area. That's where I make probably 75–80% of my revenue every year. But in the last few years, a business mentor kind of opened my eyes to, not, like you said, don't pigeonhole. So I love doing senior portraits. It's where I think I shine. But that also kind of carries over into shooting their family sessions. So those are the 2 things that I really focused on, but then also just doing headshots and beauty portraits. It's just something else to add to your revenue goals every year. Definitely don't turn work down if you can do it. But yes, a lot of us, you know, if we specialize in one thing, we're going to become known as the expert in that.
Right. And what about the pandemic? How about the rebound? How do you feel? Are we fully past the pandemic in the works you've done, or do you think there's still residual effects? We're here together today, but what about clients?
I'll say with mine, the year of the pandemic was one of my best years. I was very shocked by it, but what happened was I think clients were missing out on so much stuff, like their kids couldn't go to prom. They didn't have graduations as usual. It was very strange the whole year. So there was a lot of things that they were supposed to spend money on that they didn't spend money on, and they felt like they wanted to make up for it to their kids, especially in school. So my senior business was crazy that year, which was a big surprise for me. But then again, I really focus on the client experience. They come to me for pictures, but really they come to me for the client experience. The pictures are just a byproduct of what they're paying me for.
Nice. Yeah. Okay.
From the commercial side, we flourished during the pandemic because we did a lot of healthcare, and we traveled everywhere. We packed up the van, drove to Texas 3 times, drove to Georgia, drove to Iowa. So we figured out how can we adapt to that. You know, we went in, interviewed, did the mask and everything. So that was really good for us. And then after the pandemic, we felt the budgets weren't there anymore for the healthcare. And so that aspect of it has slowed down. But, it drove us for a while. And so.
Interesting.
Oh, can I add to
Yes,
that? Education was very much affected by the pandemic. And I think we are not going to know the results of that for a few more years. If you think about a young person being in high school or even junior high or in college, and you're isolated and you're not actually seeing other people and you're on a screen, there are aspects of that. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be dissertations written about the COVID generation or something. There is a lot of developmental learning that did not happen for a large swath of people. And we just don't know what that's going to look like in the workforce. We already see, I see a little bit of a bounce back now in the capacity that students are able to have in the classroom. But for a while it was pretty low because the world was just kind of falling apart for them and they couldn't handle it. And, you're a young person, it's hard enough. I would never go back to being 18 again for, you'd have to give me millions. So, imagine that, trying to figure out who you are, what your work is about, and in the middle of a pandemic and not having the social structures that you really need to be a grown person. So, we don't know what that is going to look like yet. And as educators, we are constantly just trying to evaluate what's happening and make some kind of quick band-aids as to how we can get around something that we see going on. But it's all new. We don't know yet.
Yeah, Kailah, you're both of you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so similarly with what you were talking about, my agency, we got a lot of work, but not through healthcare, but through like social activism and social justice in 2020. Because it was a lot of just unrest. But 2020 is like a year that it's like you had to be there. You can't make it up just because of everything that was going on. And so, to your point, there was a lot of money put behind like what are these narratives to be seen, and how do we show up and be more inclusive, and what does that look like? And then now you fast forward to 2024, and those conversations aren't necessarily happening as much. Because it's like you had, George Floyd, and then it was like, okay, well, now we have to have this response, and then everybody was like, oh, we need to do something to show that we're not racist and we love everybody. And that just kind of stopped after, everybody felt like they hit that quota of it being black enough. So
The DEI quota.
The DEI quota hit, and then it was cool.
Can I add to that too, as an artist, like after the Atlanta spa shootings, that May, I was on 10 different speaking engagements, either online or going places, and then no more. Well, a few. That May is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So there's these things that happen socially that will bump for a moment and then they go away. And I remember talking to a friend who's been really successful in his art career. He's like, I think it's time for me to quit my day job. And I was like, wait a few years, because all these organizations that are granting us money now to work on these projects about identity and Americanism, and that money may not last. So that is real.
We're going to move on to the elephant in the room, of course, technology. We're going to tackle technology and AI now. We left a little bit of a bigger chunk of time here for discussion because there's obviously a lot of meat. It's on everyone's minds. But I wanted to start the conversation about technology in general with an idea. If you look back at the history of disruptive technology from the industrial age forward, what tends to happen is we tend to use new breakthrough technologies just to do the same thing we used to do a little better. The same exact thing, just a little cleaner, a little faster, a little cheaper, maybe democratize it so that people without skilled labor sets can do that thing that it took a lot of training to do before because there's this new gadget or tool. And what happens is there's this long lag after that. where it's sometimes decades before we figure out what this new technology's unique capabilities were to do things we had never done before. We're not just replacing, but a totally fundamentally new thing we can do with that new technology, whether it's the steam engine or AI in our phones, right? So there's this long gap where we realize, oh, wait a minute, we have to retool everything now. That whole workflow we used to have based on this old technology, if we want to really capitalize on this completely new thing that this new technology can do that we've never done before, we have to revamp and retool our whole workflows and start new based on that technology. So when we talk about technology and AI, of course, we not only have to address what's happening right now and the shifts in the industry, but I want the panel to think, maybe let's think forward to what are some of the things that we're not even envisioning yet that AI is going to do, not just replace jobs today, but what are those unique new things that AI is going to let us do in the image making world that we have simply not done before. I'll start there. I'm going to show you a few stats quickly. Of course, tech, photography is a gadgety field. If you don't like gadgets, you're probably not going to love being a photographer because you're going to have them in your face all the time. So again, that trend away from SLR to mirrorless. There are some weird little bumps in the trends here, and they asked what your primary devices were. Like, in other words, what you use the most to make your imaging. And it came out mirrorless and DSLR, then phone cameras, or a combination of camera plus phone is where the response that people could give. And look at the gap here. The DSLR mirrorless crowd are these peach and teal numbers, and you can see how high they are. Right, and then down here, the low bumps for light blue and orange that people use in phones a lot. See that arc? It looks like people saying they use their phone as their primary image maker. Is of course skews very young, but it drops off quickly into the 30s. It's almost zero by then. But there's this weird inverse thing happening with people saying they use a combination of a camera plus a phone, where at the end of the arc, it actually goes back up. So people in their 50s and 60s, there's an increase in people using phones plus cameras. A little bit odd. But the gap between those responses down there and the DSLR mirrorless crowd, I think that's reflecting a difference between pros and amateurs, or full-times and part-times respondents in the crowd. That's what's going on there. AI, opinions of AI in the industry. A bit of both, positive and negative, was the biggest chunk. About a quarter said positive, and the rest were a mixture. We're going to poll that, including the audience soon. Usage, what people use it for. The biggest chunk was only sometimes or as needed, about half the respondents, and about a quarter said that they already use it as a part of their regular workflow. If you look at every genre, look at all the genres on the left of photography. In 2023, everything was about 50% AI use. Now it is every single genre is over 75%. And one, astrophotography, was 100%. Apparently, every astrophotographer is using AI right now. You can't do astrophotography without AI anymore. So if you like stars, go find a plugin. That's the takeaway. Right? So here are the uses, the things people are using AI for. The top things you can imagine: background removal, noise reduction, selecting things like selecting people out of backgrounds to isolate them. And then you get into sort of maybe like beauty retouching, color correction, skin smoothing, that sort of thing. And way down the scale, like businessy admin kind of stuff, culling your photos for the best selections, that kind of thing, tagging, object recognition. That's sort of what you would expect. So my opening questions for the panel, let's just start with the softballs, equipment. Have any of you made any major shifts in your equipment mixtures lately?
I guess in the last 2 years, we've gone totally mirrorless with everything that we use.
And what drove that?
What drove that? Probably video drove that as much as anything for us. That's a major shift for us.
Tonya, you said no.
Well, I mean, he said mirrorless. I mean, I guess I did go mirrorless, but if you're asking me what drove it, I really just needed a tax deduction. That's
There you go.
why I did it.
There you go. Sure, right? Small businesses, exactly. So not a whole lot of equipment change. What the tipping point was, let's do a show of hands, and we're going to include the audience. Panelists, Let's get your pulse check on AI. I'm gonna ask how many people have positive, negative, or a bit of both. How many of you have a full-throated embrace of AI? 100%. Oh, including the audience too. Let's just look. Both at the same time. Like really optimistic about AI's future. Okay, well that's a lot. That's a third of the audience. What about people that are negative? Boo, hate it, scared of it, it's gonna replace me.
Scared to raise their hand now.
Not one hand. One hand.
I just don't use it. That's
Yeah, okay, got it. That's surprising. Wow, I would have thought that there would have been more negativity around AI, a little fear-based reaction maybe.
I think there would have been a year ago.
So what about a bit of both? People that maybe just don't know yet or are like not sure, reserving judgment, waiting? Okay, this is a positive crowd.
I want to add a whole curveball to this.
Okay.
So in the last 7 years, I would say there has been a desire by my students to shoot more film.
Analog.
Yeah, and then scanning film, right, and creating digital prints. But our biggest purchase at the Art Academy of Cincinnati for photo, we bought a whole bunch of 35 millimeter film cameras that were all the same because we had this hodgepodge, that the students could check out. And it was impossible for our media services to manage all the different things. But that was our last big expenditure, was 12 35 millimeter
35 millimeter
film cameras.
Wow.
Because students want to work in the darkroom. In fact, our medium and large format class that we have right now, about 4 years ago, I started including developing your own color film in that, because so many of the folks that the students were looking at online that were doing fashion and editorial were shooting color film and developing it themselves and like really embracing the messiness and the kind of unexpected things that happen in that process. So the students are really gravitating towards that. I don't know what that means for AI.
Do you see
but
that as a growing trend?
it's probably stagnated right now, but the classes, actually I'd say our medium and large format class that's being offered right now is small.
Yeah.
It is a small class. It was offered 2 years ago, and I think it was a little bit bigger, but
Tonya and David, you were gonna jump in.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It was Kailah and David.
Sure. Okay. An interesting insight, I guess, last night, walking around beautiful town, going on. I was with some family, some artist friends. No one said, what tool do they use for this? What tool do they use to make this? So, as I kind of think about AI, as I think about returning to analog, the medium used to be the message. Now, nobody cares what the medium is. And it's about the experience. It's about how it makes you feel. And so, thinking about just the human condition psychologically as humans, what that experience is, I think is probably the future.
Yeah.
I just want to say, when I think about filmmaking, when you think about the Academy Awards of Art and Sciences.
Right.
So those two things have never been mutually exclusive from each other. Art and science, especially in filmmaking, have always went hand in hand. If you think about animation, think about cameras, you think about any kind of technology. So this kind of concept that they would ever be mutually exclusive is always kind of odd to me when we have these conversations about AI, because it's like it's always been technologically driven. I just think it's about how do you insert yourself into that technology. And so I can't think of your name right now. Yes, Alan. Alan came to a networking event a couple of months ago, but something that you said really stuck with me. And you was telling me about the trends just over time, and you said, at first photographers were really scared about autofocus, because autofocus was going to take away, your ability to be a photographer. Then it was internal light meters.
Sure.
And then Photoshop came out, and almost everybody had a meltdown. Oh, you can't be a real photographer, you got Photoshop. Right. So I do think that this is just another one of those trends. Sure. And you just got to learn it, or you will get left behind.
And I was just gonna say too, in talking how David was talking about the client experience, and I mentioned that too earlier. As long as we're focusing on that part of it, AI can't replace us. AI can make pretty pictures and you can tell it what to do, but from the client standpoint, if you're dealing with customers directly, it's how you make them feel for the day of their photo shoot or whatever you're doing with them. If you can make them feel like $1 million, that's worth more than the pictures.
And repeat business.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the second slide from the stats, like market penetration of AI. How many people right now would say they already have AI as a regular part of their standard workflow? All right, again, like half the room. Gosh, okay. Well, we're mirroring that slide, that stat from the report then. How many people haven't used it at all yet, as far as they know? As far as they know. Not many.
But really, we all have though. If you've used Photoshop ever
Sure.
in your life,
Yeah.
content-aware fill has always been there.
Yes,
And
it
that
has.
is AI.
My question for Adobe is, when are they coming up with conscience-aware fill?
It's in the works.
It's coming.
Premiering 2027.
They have a philosophy lab somewhere, deep in the bowels of the building, yes. Okay, so we mirror the stats from the report there. Is there anything you think we're missing in these early AI hysteria? Is there anything about AI you think we're not paying attention to and we're just worried about job evolution loss in this fear? Maybe it's a fear-based reaction, or maybe it's a full-throated embrace given the positivity you described. Is there anything we're not paying attention to?
I mean, it's such a big topic, you don't know where to start. We broke it into kind of like 3 buckets at LPK. One is like AI to like automate a task, which we don't do a lot of task stuff in the creative world. I don't know, every project's kind of different, tailor a solution to whatever the problem is for your client. So that's, not very interesting, and honestly, we just don't see a need for it, but much of the AI world is around automation. And then like expanding capabilities, so, we are into film and motion now, we've never done that as an agency, just because AI makes it a little bit easier.
It crossed a threshold production-wise that made things that were out of reach or too time-consuming or costly before viable.
Or doing it earlier in the process and selling an idea, which is a very helpful tool for AI. And then there's kind of a third bucket where it's just like expanding consciousness, expanding creativity, creative upscaling. And that's really kind of the interesting part of where AI is going to go, I think.
Right. And one of the reasons why I started with the softballs about equipment is because I wanted to circle around with that. I think with the release of the iPhone 16 and its embedded AI agents, how do you foresee that gadgety part of photography changing? Because I can personally see a time when there's not this distinction, right? AI is going to be embedded in the very devices we're using from the outset. It already is, it's starting to be there.
When I think about just technology in general, it allows for more accessibility. So I think that when you've been a photographer and you were trained earlier on, it's like, is this real exclusive field? Not everybody can partake because the equipment's so expensive. There's no YouTube to teach you. Like if I want to be a photographer and I'm poor, I have no access to somebody who would teach me how to do anything, now I'm not a photographer. That bar is lowering because of technological advances. And I think that's a real beautiful thing. So I think it's going to become less about the gadgets because, these phones are getting so good. And they're just going to continue to increase in quality. And people are still teaching people online. If you want to be a photographer now, you really can be. And there's no access point, which I think is lovely. But I think it's going to force creatives to be more creative. I think that we can't get stagnant in the things that we used to do, and we have to continue to be trailblazers and use these tools to our advantage.
Yeah,
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I think with that democratization of creativity and creating, we're going to get inundated with a lot of junk, and there's going to be a lot of folks who just maybe don't have the taste or the skill or the experience to curate things that are effective and interesting. So
curation is a key word.
Curation is a very, very key word, and I think us with experience and taste and an eye for what's good and effective are going to really thrive.
Yeah.
I would just like to add to that too, and this is something that we talk about in the classroom, although I don't know that students realize that they're interacting with AI so much, but there's a lot that's automated for us on the cameras and in our software. And when we learn how to do things, where it's like, okay, everything's non-manual. Like, you need to figure out how to do that yourself, color correct that yourself, do that yourself, so that you understand the process. But I think that the biggest thing about AI is that we need to be just discerning on when we use it. Because there are going to be some things that really you need a human to look at it and to feel how that image is coming across to someone that AI can't do for you.
Yeah, emotion.
But there's a lot that AI can do for you. So it's just a matter of figuring out when you use it and when you don't use it.
Sure.
And then, to get that image that is the best image of possible. It's just a tool not to be used all the time, but some of the time, right?
Right. I would say
Unless that's what it's about, right?
unless that's part of the creative idea, right? Yeah, like piggybacking on the opening thought about that lag between a new technology and when we find out what its unique new uses are. I have a feeling that AI will be embedded in full-blown camera systems and whole workflows soon, but I can also see farther in the future a time when I think lens-based focusing light onto a sensor of some kind will not be the only way to make images anymore. If you think about bats using sonar location to see in the world, I think we'll have microphone arrays with AI-driven imaging capability to make visuals out of that in spaces across smart cities, right? Things that are capturing light rays and always on, 24/7, just capturing all the light in a space and then going back later and reconstructing the light that happened during events and making images and video out of that. That will eventually be a part of what AI does for us. So I think lens-based imaging itself is probably waning. It will be attacked at some point with AI technologies and other kinds of sensing devices. That's a huge topic. We can, of course, go back to that. Let's talk a little bit about adapting to change, because you overachievers, you already jumped into this section a little bit about adaptation. So this is going to be a quick section. Some stats about adapting to a shifting market. Above here on the top, you see full-time self-employed and then part-time self-employed. There has been an increase in full-time self-employed photographers and a decrease in part-time self-employed photographers. So the report writers theorized that might be just a straight-up rise in entrepreneurship since the pandemic. I think people are making a leap. They're not going back to traditional jobs, they're cutting the cord, and they're saying, okay, let's make a go of it. So that's a big trend. And of course, this shift away in the market from calling yourselves only a photographer to doing a little bit of video has only increased incrementally about 5 to 6%. That's, for that many people across an industry, that's a big shift. That's a lot of people now calling themselves both photographers and videographers. That trend is only continuing now. And then talking about these different markets, client and non-client, what do you actually produce in the world? Is it purely digital? Is it some work product that either goes into a gallery or to a print that gets sold? The biggest chunk, 52% of the respondents said that they do a little both. They do mostly digital products for clients, but they also make some print and product. The next chunk, 24, said only digital. 24, a quarter of the people said I do nothing but works for hire, and I send those digital products right to a client, and that's my whole business model. And then 19.5% said only print products and only physical products. So that's a small part of the market, doing nothing but product. 36% of people said that they have sold more physical products in the last year. So selling physical products has moved up. Maybe that tracks a little bit with the rise in analog, right? People wanting paper again, people wanting a photograph to be an object, a real thing, rather than just something on a glowing screen. So changes in specialties, I brought this one back again, moving toward people, that's an adaptation in the market. And again, over 75% AI now in just 1 year's time, mostly because of tool. So adapting to change. Let's say, has anyone here on the panel shifted what you would consider your job status, or have you started new ventures or entrepreneurial
ventures lately? Yeah?
Yes.
Kailah? Yes.
I definitely still see myself as a filmmaker from an artist perspective, but from a work perspective, I would say more of a creative director. So that shift is kind of taken a hold of me when I'm like, okay, if I'm going to scale my business, I can't be the only one that's shooting and working, or else I will never be able to scale. So I have to be able to use communication skills and tell other people what I need, and it's been hard and challenging. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, has a style, has what they like, what like lens choice they would use, or somebody else doesn't use it, but just saying like, hey, if I'm going to grow, I have to be able to multiply myself.
Yes.
So that's one area. And then I started a startup.
Nice.
Yeah,
Doing
so
what?
this was that was a new transition. So it's still in the works. So there's no physical product yet, but it's a app that connects small businesses to investors like Tinder. So you get on the app and you swipe right or you swipe left, and then you make the connection and hopefully get some money.
Small business app-based dating.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
Come on.
Absolutely.
You need a sexy logo.
Oh, absolutely.
Needs to show up on a feed, right?
Yeah, it's like your love license in the pics.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead and get some money.
Let's talk a little bit about habits. Have any of you been actively working to change an old habit lately? Sure, it could be personal. It could be personal. It could be the toothpaste on the counter.
How deep you want us to go here?
Right.
For us, I think there's a return to focusing on relationships. You know, like
Again, people.
Yeah, I mean, this business is kind of based on your network. You know, just be a good person, be fun to work with, like you said, Tonya. Want them to come back. But, you know, we kind of tend to overthink and overanalyze things in this industry, but it's do good work, answer the phone, and tell people that you've done damn good work is really what it comes down to. And answer the phone, yes. Yeah, and don't be an energy vacuum, you know. Just show up and be a good person to work with, so.
Right?
I was gonna say, I finally gave away the job of retouching. I always felt like I could never give it away. So I trained my husband to be my
Oh no, we know where this is going.
for it, but I don't also have to do it.
It's in-house. I love it.
He's never touched Photoshop in his life, and he's amazing at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Upskilling.
So let's one quick final question under adapting to change. How do you foresee your primary role and value in the industry with mentoring education shifting as AI use expands? How do you think our values as imagists and image makers is going to shift?
Can I go back to the last question?
Sure.
Sorry. I have something. So I think part of the reason why I've started to go into the education administration by being chair is because I see, and this is again a focus on people, but I see that there's a gap in the way that students are able to direct their own education and how the education system is set up. We really need to give more control to the student. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, is someone mature enough to understand what they need to learn so they take the right classes? But giving students more choice in a field like photography that is so broad, you could go on a variety of different pathways. And giving students the opportunity to kind of take those different directions is really important. I also feel like we need to get away from that hierarchical system of the teacher is going to tell you how to do this or what to do, because now with technology changing so much, the teacher might not even know the software that the student is talking about, but you know what, we can figure it out together.
Right.
And we can so I think it's really important to kind of break down some of those. My bio on my website is like, yes, my title is professor, but I profess nothing. like we're a team trying to work towards whatever the goal of the student is, right?
Yeah.
And that is so that evolution is just so rapid that this year, the strategies that I'm using may not even be relevant to next year. So I have to really be focused on the student and just
Sure.
pick up all the things as they go
Come
along.
on, man.
Real quick, I think that is so true for the three of us, what Todd and Joe and I do, because we all come from the commercial background. We're all photographers. We've all, steered our own ship, done it the way we wanted to do it for 35 years. And it took us a while to fall in line with each other to go, what's my role? And then listen to each other and respect. We always respected each other, but it was like, assign those roles and fall back. I mean, a lot of us in here are older photographers, and to be able to surround ourselves with people that are really skilled, no matter what age, and listen to them and learn from them. And I think that's what we do constantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what we're talking about is the soft skills of the business.
Soft skills,
really.
right? People
I mean,
again.
The young designers we hire come in just with amazing education. Kudos to you. Like technically way better than I was when I started the industry. And we spent years never talking about how to become better in Photoshop or Illustrator. Until AI, we never focused on software. Like all the wisdom I would impart on them, or the little wisdom that I have that I would impart on them, was all the soft skills: how to read a room, how to sell, how to talk to people, how to network. Those are the things that I think are still important.
100%.
And when I think about like mentorship or like bringing up, I think that's the question, like the younger generation, I think that we have to allow people to lean into a point of view and be disruptors in the space. So like, I think that it's like, hey, the technology is going to be there, the skill set's going to be there. To your point, it's like you learn, you can adapt in that way. But what is your point of view, and why would somebody want to work with you? And that is what I try to teach anybody that's coming under me. It's like, okay, I can teach you these technical skills, but you have to have a perspective. And then you got to double down on that perspective, because that's what's actually going to make you interesting.
Your value.
Yeah, that's where the value
Yeah.
is. And then, like, if you can shake up a space and, maybe have a different perspective and be kind of disruptive to a system that's been, kind of
Right.
whatever, then you will be able to, like, make your mark known, and you'll be hireable.
And brand,
People
yeah.
will want that.
So the big takeaway in this section, I think, is that discernment that we've talked about, especially from AI, right? That human wisdom in that way will never be replaced. There's an old saying that I've always loved, that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Right? So that discernment is going to matter more and more. And as we age, maybe it's not so bad that there are a lot of people in our industry that have that kind of wisdom that can help mentoring and finding that discernment, especially with new technologies. Last section, this will be a quick one, because I think we've already touched on some of these. Business and market outlook, kind of down in the dumps emotionally. People are feeling like this is a slower year for them, and they're not necessarily looking forward to next year. Usually like the New Year's bump, right? People get excited about a new year. That went down by 5 or 6% from 2023 to 2024. 43% of the people were looking for a better year last year. This year, only 38% are looking for a better year next year. So again, I think a little bit of a pall is over us emotionally. Business primary issues, client-based photography, they're spending 46%, at least half of their time looking for new clients and thinking about pricing. Non-client people are a little bit more balanced. They're spending only a third of their time actually selling work product, and about a quarter of their time finding new clients. So the gaps here, if you look at the rest of the 30 or 40%, it looks like non-client people have more time to actually do their work than the people doing client-based photography, right? Client photographers are spending less time actually doing the work that they're selling. It's keeping them in business, the non-client folks. Business trade shows, this was interesting, and the stat kind of jumped out at me. The non-client people, landscape, wildlife, fine art, were the highest respondents in going to trade shows. So that is probably being driven by print sales. The ones that they said they were going to the most, Imaging USA was the highest, and then WPPI for portraiture the second highest. Those are these yellow, orange spikes here. So I think in the non-client segment here, that's probably people going to trade shows, setting up booths, and selling print product that way. So that's a lot. So business, last few questions here. Show of hands, who's been negatively impacted this year? Would you say your business is down or up? Are you feeling thumbs up, thumbs down from this year across the panel? Thumbs up? Good? Things are up? Moderate? Right in the middle? It's about half and half.
My art career is up.
Nice.
Enrollment in colleges everywhere is down.
Down, yes.
And I'm told that it is going to keep going down because there are less college-age students coming up. So folks are having less children, and there are going to be less spots, which, that is going to be something we have to figure out.
I think another trend there is you're actually competing against some other education sources now. Globally, there's a lot of mistrust in big institutions, right? That's rising. We have less faith in bigger institutions. So people are getting professional kickstart educations that are affordable to them and accessible to them from product marketers and content creators online.
Yes, I mean, the cost of education is outrageous. And the amount that students are able to borrow sometimes doesn't even cover tuition. When I went to college, I could cover tuition and live a little bit. Still had to have a job, but it's out of control. I think part of that is because our government doesn't support education like it used to, and so colleges have to increase tuition or, I'm trying to get more fundraising and things like that. But that is a real worry because just like everything else online, it is subjective. You don't know what is going to be taught when you go out and try to find things online. And at least with the college systems, you have accreditations and you have vetting systems out there that try to keep things accessible for all, try to keep things nonpartisan, try to keep, all these safeguards that education tries to do, that the internet is the Wild West, right? There's none of those safeguards up. So as more people can't afford to go to college, we're going to start seeing some of those social implications coming into photography as well.
Already are, yeah. We're going to pause here. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the extension of that business outgrowth at ASMP. We're going to give some stuff away, and then we're going to have a free-for-all. We're going to talk about whatever we feel like talking about. So some of the things that they talked about at the beginning, I have actual images of for you to see here. ASMP is a trade organization, as you know, in the imaging industry. And these are some of those things. Ask a Pro, one-on-ones, if you are a member here. Find a creative. This is an interesting thing I want to talk about. There's a great search engine that ASMP hosts that allows you to find creatives in any region down to the genre and specialty too, and that's rare. If you just do a organic search online, you're going to find all kinds of things. But you can find all the way down to stylists, producers, every subcategory and genre. And being listed in that is a pretty big member benefit. I've gotten some hits from being in that search engine myself. We also partnered with Sony to make the ASMP Academy, and it's mostly business foundations, copyright registration, incorporating anti-racism in your business briefs, copyright, of course. We have Tom Madry as our chief counsel, who has been in the Supreme Court and doing a lot of amicus briefs on behalf of creators, doing a lot of writing. So he's been a real renegade there. And new resources reaching out to content creators, young folks. And this event, this was our Netflix moment. We just taped our special. This event is going to be up on national websites. You can see videos like these events today have been done by LA, by the New York chapter. Again, we're one of only 38 chapters all across the country making content like this. So this was your star turn on Netflix. And we have an open Q&A session. We're going to jump ahead and thank some people. We want you to stand up. Our event committee, please stand if you're on this list. Jim, Terry, Tonya gets to stand on the stage. Will, Hal, me, and Jen Coe. Right? I mean, that was a lot. Please, jumping ahead, even for the open session, give a huge round of applause to our panelists for donating their wisdom today. And our big sponsors, KNR Studio 821 and Jake Bodo here, and the contributors, ProMaster, Westcott, Panasonic, Kradoc, and Barkan. And we got some director's chairs
from Midwest Grip and Lighting.
Oh,
Thank
They
you.
came through and loaned us the chairs. Absolutely fantastic.
Let's give stuff away.
Yes.
There's some goodies.
Valuable stuff.
For sure. All right, so free for all. Let's open it up to the floor. Let's finish up strong here with an open Q&A. No topic is off boundary. Please jump in. Say who you are. Let's know.
I'm Mike. I have a question for the creative director, David. You mentioned real early on that you were wanting to work with people that were more specialized in what they were doing. But then from that point on, all we're talking about is content creators who are not specialists. They're jack of all trades, everything from video to animation, the whole bit. So your clients, when you're talking about a big client who's got a real project that they feel is important and they have a big budget, are you running into less and less people to choose from because the people that are coming to you are, well, I'm a content creator, I can do your social media, I can do everything for you, versus a specialist that does, let's say, architecture or product like Terry or whatever.
Is the pool narrowing, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time talent vetting, so we have a list of go-to resources, and I mean, look, we work in brand design space. Our categories are, food, beverage, grooming, beauty. We kind of know just who's the cream of the crop in those specialties, so it's not like we're working in a huge broad market either, but our clients, those big budgets that you were saying are shrinking. The time we have to do things are shrinking, so the pressure there is just to get it right the first time. So we have to find
So
many
what's your view
specialists.
on content creators then? Are they lesser than the people you typically hire because you're looking for somebody like
A
Terry
specialist.
Campbell, who's a food specialist,
Mhm.
versus a content creator who shoots restaurant stuff for DoorDash?
Yeah.
They claim they're a food shooter too, but
Mhm.
obviously there's a difference between what Terry does and what they do.
I can't say I've ever hired a content creator.
Okay, that's my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that way. And that goes back to you, Kailah, too, so that we'll follow up.
Okay, this is like a general question to those that like run production crews and like run teams. As someone who is trying to become a specialist and get on like a grip, a lighting, or like become a colorist, where do I look to meet those people?
Here.
Yeah.
That's like this.
Definitely, I would say, have you worked on any movies?
No, I'm trying to.
You're trying to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have like 3 people I can introduce you to.
No, wonderful.
That I just know personally that does that type of work. They mainly work on films, and I know one guy with a grip that does like a lot of commercial work.
Yeah.
So it's just about like making that one kind of connection,
Yeah.
and then that connection will then snowball into some more, and then you'll meet those guys. And like you said, this is also a good space.
Well, and people like Midwest Grip and Lighting,
Yeah,
can't you get on a
yeah.
list with those guys and they'll provide names to people?
Midwest Grip
'Cause,
and Lighting.
yeah, they bring people in from all over the country.
A lot of
from
people
movies
start
and
out
stuff.
there.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the audience? Burning question, something you didn't ask earlier that we moved on? Yeah.
I have 2 questions. My first question is,
Please use the mic.
Todd Joyce. My first question is, as far as AI, I think that was such a muddled understanding. We all have a muddled understanding of what AI is. Some people are like, oh yeah, I use auto outline in Photoshop, that's AI. So it's like, well, yeah, I use it all the time. But how many people are actually generating imagery through prompts to create, and my question to the room is how many people are actually doing that and or selling it, and getting revenue stream from it?
We have at least 2 right here, Tony and Terry, for sure.
But I mean, I'd love to see some hands, just how many.
Even from the
people are
audience.
doing that.
People doing AI work like that image generation, using AI and actually doing it in sellable work. That's a fair number of people, it's over 10.
Yeah, what do you include in that? I mean, do you
That's my
include filling gaps, like, or?
That's my question. I think in this room, there are people who are like, oh yeah, I use it all the time. but how are you using it and to what extent is my question, I
Yeah.
guess.
Sure. So one thing to throw into that mix, there are already people with business cards that say AI prompt writer. There are career AI prompt writers already in the field. So it's a thing.
It just takes so much time.
No, I understand. We're doing it, but I'm just curious how many people are, because when everybody was raising their hand, it's like, yeah, you're using Photoshop, but are you actually generating imagery and creating revenue?
There's maybe kind of a threshold thing there too, right? There's like photojournalists say you move 1 pixel, you're violating photojournalistic standards, right? That's AI. Like, where is the threshold? I think it changes, it shifts across genres too.
And I'll just say, Todd, on my end, when I raised my hand, said that I use it regularly, the part that I'm using, when I differentiate the use of AI, it's like, which part of it is real, which part of your image is real, and which part is, I don't want to use the word fake in a negative tone, but I mean, it is not in the image, so it is added. For me, it's sky replacement. Because I only use a reflector on location, unless it's really gloomy, then I'll take a light, but usually I'm too lazy to carry a light. Sorry, John. I'm writing teacher over here. He doesn't want to hear that. So I use my reflector everywhere. It works great on my person, but it doesn't do anything for the sky. So I am always putting my skies back.
One thing.
So, and I started this with, I have 2 questions. May I ask the second?
Yeah, sure, go on.
And my question is to David. As somebody who hires people regularly, you are forced as an agency to become more efficient, more economical by your clients. I hear that from agencies quite often. How much AI are you self-generating and or hiring out? And how is that affecting, let's say, your total subcontractor? Like, how much are you spending on subcontract? I don't want to hear the number.
Yeah.
By percentage, how much are you spending on subcontractors now versus last year or the year before?
How is AI impacting agency creative budgets?
I mean, for now, most of the lawyers in the corporations won't sign off on AI usage in a
Right.
because
copyright.
Because of copyright standards. So I think the book is yet to be written on how that book ends. So, we generate everything in-house, but then we're usually calling on folks like you to recreate it legally.
So conceptually, you're generating
It's mostly upstream in the conceptual stages to sell in ideas.
To visualize for clients and help them understand direction.
These people can't visualize anything.
Right.
So it helps.
Right.
It helps.
You used to employ sketch artists to do that, and now you
Exactly.
do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Storyboarding.
Storyboarding, a lot of storyboarding, yeah.
So I have a follow-up question to that.
So David, once the legal department say, yeah, you can use AI, were you done 2 weeks ago and you don't call me? Or?
You don't want to hear the answer to this.
Did we just break up?
That's a good question.
Jerry brought up the elephant in the room.
Well, I see that, because I see layouts that come to me that are pretty tight, and they're all AI, and I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? Our legal department won't let us use this yet.
Yeah.
But that's going to change. So I'm trying to see if you see another value in photographers doing those images, or adding something to those images, or if you see it that, hey, this is something that could change a lot of the way we all work together.
Yeah, it's hard to answer the question. I've thought on it. I mean, there's 2 sides of the coin, I think. One, like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of your tech stack now, right? Like, it's just about how you're creatively blending all these programs together. And photography in a photo studio is one of those programs that we can use to explore and find a solution to a problem. I mean, we have a term internally. I don't know if we made this up, so I won't trademark it.
It's not trademarked.
We call it the dopamine casino. Like, I wake up in the morning and I just keep pulling the lever of the slot machine, and I have 5,000 images to look at by lunchtime.
Yes, right.
And I'm like, just curating all these images, going through it. So, like,
exhausting.
Just getting with Terry for a half day and doing something is sort of more efficient than just sitting in my
So we might wind up backing into some work just because of the glut of fakeness that's out there from this tsunami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I comment on this? I kind of am experiencing it. I'm just starting to mess with the thing for visual. I use AI for ChatGPT all the time. I think that I'm not an amazing writer. I don't have an English degree. I'm using that to pad out my soft skills. So I would say I am generating income by using that source because it's making me serve my client better by being more eloquent so that they can understand what I'm trying to communicate verbally, be it an email or through, I use it a lot for blog posting. I generate the ideas, I vet the material to make sure it's factual because it does make things up. And I also have somebody with an English degree that happens to be my fiance. I actually look over to make sure that the AI is doing what it's supposed to do because she uses it a lot in her work in technical writing. And she said it's basically like a toddler and it doesn't really follow the rules all the time. And it doesn't doesn't parse information the way that every end user is going to want to be able to communicate with it. So you have to kind of moderate it, curate it, if you will. But in the prompt generation for visuals, I'm kind of running into the problem, like you're saying, I'm creating really beautiful stuff, and maybe it's a failure on my part of not understanding how to communicate with the AI. I'm not really getting the results that I want out of it, that I can then turn around and sell to a client.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The AI use of text is a big part of your business rather than AI use for imagery. I often talk about this a lot at Taft. There's this sort of diaphanous curtain between the world of words and the world of images. And I think image makers are people that are sort of warriors that traverse that river back and forth all the time. We create briefs in text with clients, and then we give them pictures. They look at them, and then they give us words back about how they feel about it, and then we turn those words back into changes in those images. We give the images back to them. They give us words back about those images, and then we make changes to those images again until they're happy, and that's the way it works. So it's like we have swords on our back about words going to image and back and forth. So it's interesting to see you're using AI first for the text part of our business. It's a big part of what we do.
Well, I don't think making the image is the problem for me.
Yeah, right. Making the words is the problem.
Soft skills that I'm still working on.
Interesting.
Just speaking about making sellable imagery from the AI, I have a couple product accounts that I've had for years, or catalog work, and we would go on location and we would take these artificial florals or whatever and put them in this beautiful location and shoot them. We'd do 20 a day or whatever we would do. And over time, it's like the client wants to go out less and do that kind of stuff. And so what we do now is we'll shoot this product on a table, just a plain tabletop. And then through AI, I create a background. And it's beautiful. And you can't tell the difference. And sometimes I'll create the background through AI, put it on a projector. Terry and I have had great conversations about this. And that background projects into the table, and you see it, and it's so real. And so we're doing that all the time and making money off that. And it's a nice revenue stream for us.
Anything else? We're at time right now, but we're going to keep going. But we have the room for a while, but we'll finish this last question in the back. Shout it out.
Not a question. Ron, Studio 21, but
Nice.
we just created a holiday set, and it's real. We're getting accused that it's AI. You can actually read the books and tell them. So we took photos and put it out for promo. It's kind of funny.
Nice.
People think it's either the backdrop that we bought,
right,
or AI, but no, it's real.
So you had to take pictures from the side, showing the room around the drops. Right. Well, listen, thank you everyone for coming. I think this was a great room. It was a great event, a great space. Thank you to the Taft Museum too for hosting us here, and thanks once again to the panelists. And enjoy the refreshments, continue the conversation, network, business cards. Thank you all again. Thank you for coming. It was a great round of applause for everyone. Thank you.
It's so emotionally touched.
Yes.
Is there a photographer in the room?